Amen. Well, good morning again, church. It is great to see you today. My name is John, one of the pastors here. Super thankful for Trevor, one of our elders, preaching last week, continuing our series through the book of Hebrews. I'm excited to be back, and we look forward to the next few months as we continue in this great book. As we get into it today, a little bit of a morbid start here, but imagine that you're about 100 yards offshore and you're just trying to keep your head above water and you're not really swimming, you're almost drowning, and somebody on the shore holds up a sign that says, "Here's how to swim." Now, that would be moderately helpful in the moment, right? But not what you need. What you need is for someone to jump in and rescue you. Really, that's the argument that Hebrews 7 makes. The passage we will study today says similar things. It basically will teach us that the law of Moses was a sign on the beach. It was pointing us to salvation, telling us about salvation. And the Levitical priests back then were the lifeguards who couldn't swim forever because they kept dying, they kept needing relief, they kept needing to have forgiveness for their own sins. But Jesus jumped in, and he never gets tired. And you know why this matters so much? We're going to talk a lot about priesthood and this guy named Melchizedek, all kinds of stuff, and it can be confusing and it can be a little bit detailed, but here's why this all matters so much, this passage today. Not merely because this is the argument he's been building to, the author from chapter 5 now through 7, he finally gets there. That's part of why it matters, yes, but here's why this is critical. Because this passage is a complete dismantling of any confidence that you might have in your own religious performance. Your family pedigree, or your moral effort, or your track record compared to other people, or your ability to somehow try and maintain a right standing before God through your own effort. It's a complete dismantling of all of that, which is exactly what verse 19 says here, that on the other hand, a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. A better hope. That's where we're going today. To find and see this better hope. There's all kinds of things we search for to base our hope on. Today we'll see what's better. And we start here in chapter 7 of Hebrews with the first 3 verses, something remarkable here. It's a reference to a man named Melchizedek. Now, this man, Melchizedek, he shows up in just 3 verses in the Old Testament, in Genesis chapter 14, just 3 simple verses. He's merely a footnote in Abraham's story. But did you see how big a deal Melchizedek seems to be to the author of Hebrews? Because you see who he was. Verse 1 says he was king of Salem and priest of God Most High. And we look back at Genesis 14 and we see this Melchizedek figure. It seems like he just, this priest king man who just kind of seems to show up out of nowhere. He blesses Abraham and then he just disappears. 3 verses. We don't see anything more of him. And verse 3 reminds us there was no birth record. There was no death record. There was no genealogy. This guy is just king, priest, brings bread, wine, blesses, and then disappears. It seems like this sort of random, odd character out of nowhere in the middle of Genesis just shows up and poof, he's gone. It seems odd, but the author of Hebrews says, hey, listen, that's the point. That's the point here. It's not about Melchizedek. See, this Melchizedek, he's got a lot to teach us. First, his name. It says it here. His name means king of righteousness. And then he was the king of peace, king of Salem, which if you know Hebrew in any form, you've probably heard the word shalom. The word means peace. Salem, shalom, similar. That's what he's the king of. Both righteousness and peace. Two things that Psalm 85:10 said would kiss later. They would come together as one, righteousness and peace. It's pointing us to the Messiah who Isaiah said would be the Prince of Peace, who Paul later said would become to us wisdom from God, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption. This righteousness and peace would eventually meet in the Messiah. Melchizedek seems to point us there. Now, if you do any study on Melchizedek, you realize that some people believe this was a pre-incarnate appearance of the Son of God, second person of the Trinity. Some people would say that's who Melchizedek is. It's hard to say yes or no to that. At the very least, maybe he was, but at the very least, we see he's a living icon of something. He's a type of something, specifically the Messiah, but specifically what you and I have always needed. See, he's righteousness and peace. He's showing us what we have always needed. He's showing us something here of what humanity has always lacked, but has always craved. We as humans, we want someone who is both righteous, just, and peaceful. Someone who is both holy and near. Someone who is both king and priest. We are looking for that. We're wanting that. This seemingly obscure man in the middle of the Old Testament points us to that person, to the one who came to fulfill all of those things, to the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Now, again, I said this is going to be a little technical. Some things here that we don't understand, maybe have trouble understanding. That's okay. But the next question, you're like, okay, why does this matter? Like, all right, Melchizedek, some Old Testament study we're doing, that's cool. He was a guy in Genesis 4. What does this matter for us today? Here's why. Some of us in this room are trying to generate our own righteousness, whether that's through church attendance or a moral track record that's better than someone else down the street, that you're better than most people. So surely God's got to accept me because I'm a righteous person, at least relatively. The problem with Melchizedek showing up is his appearance whispers to us that righteousness is a title that must be given, not earned. You can't earn your way to righteousness. You can't be righteous. You must be given righteousness. And peace with God is a gift from a priest, not something you can perform well enough to have. So his appearance, seemingly obscure, is pointing us to something lacking in us: righteousness, peace. We can't do this ourselves. We can't manufacture it ourselves. But this random dude in Old Testament times shows up and is righteousness and peace and points us to the one who fulfills righteousness and peace. Because isn't that what we've always needed? Haven't we always needed to be righteous? We have this inherent understanding that we don't meet God's standard. We have this inherent chaos. We don't have peace with God. We don't have peace in the world. And it's all lacking. We know we need these things. Those things are only found, according to Hebrews 7, in Jesus. And so the author then makes a continued argument here. He actually makes a move that would have been shocking To those who were Jewish background believers who would have heard this, where he says next in verses 4 through 11, he talks about how this Abraham submitted to Melchizedek. He submitted to Melchizedek. Now, remember what they saw Abraham to be. Like, they saw Abraham, the father of the faith. This is the guy that God gave the covenant to. Like, the reason we are Israel is because God said to Abraham, I'm going to make of you a great nation. Like, Abraham was the dude. He was the hero of the story. He's the guy. And yet, he bowed to another. He bowed to this man named Melchizedek. Not only that, he gave Melchizedek 10% of everything he had. He gave him a tithe. He had all of this that God had blessed him with, and he gave 10% to Melchizedek. And then Abraham received Melchizedek's blessing. He blessed Abraham. That's why verse 7 makes a very clear rule here, saying it is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. Did you see what he just did? He called Abraham inferior. That this Melchizedek was superior to him. Like, that's, again, this is the dude. Abraham's the guy. The author of Hebrews says, yeah, but he was inferior to this figure. So just think about what this means. Most of Hebrews talks about this idea of the Levitical priesthood. Now, you may not understand what that means. That was whenever God had a tabernacle built. He had all the rules set up for how it was supposed to be handled. He had the right group of people, these Levites, the tribe of Levi, one of Jacob's 12 sons. His family was to be the priests in the tabernacle. They were the only ones. And so this Levitical priesthood was what perpetuated throughout the generations. It all descended from Abraham, from the promise. This is how God intended to do it. So we are the chosen, the priests, right? We are the ones, the Levites. And so what the author of Hebrews does here is he says, actually, when Abraham back then bowed before Melchizedek, in a sense, all of Levi bowed before Melchizedek as well. When Abraham paid a tithe to Melchizedek, all of Levi paid a tithe. Even though the Levites were the ones that received the tithes in the tabernacle scenes, in Abraham, they paid a tithe. That's what verses 9 and 10 say here. Watch this. One might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham. He was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. So here's what this is doing. Again, that means the entire system, all that the Levitical priesthood illustrated, the entire system, the tabernacle, the sacrifices, the Day of Atonement, the incense, the robes, the blood on the doorpost, all of it was already acknowledging its insufficiency since it came from the body of Abraham. Like, he's saying, it's in Abraham, it's limited, it's actually temporary. That's what we're saying here with this, is that the Levitical priesthood in this scene, as it's teaching us, is that it was always temporary. It was never meant to be the final thing. It was always temporary, which is what exactly says it in verse 11. If perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for under the people received the law, what further need would there have been for another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek, rather than one named after the order of Aaron? So the author's saying the system indicted itself. It was always temporary. It was always limited. Here's how we know. Psalm 110 was written after the law was given, after Aaron became the priest in the line of Abraham, after the tabernacle was built, after the system was going, David, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, writes 110 in the Psalms. It says this: the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So David, in the midst of the system run by the Levitical priesthood, the whole process that God himself ordained for them to do, he's in the middle of it, seeing this vision to say, actually, there's another priesthood coming. It made me think about scaffolding at a construction site. You're like, how in the world did you get there? Okay, watch this. Scaffolding is essential because it holds workers in place while the real building is being built. But no one looks at the finished building and says, man, that scaffolding is beautiful. Right? They don't. Nobody does. The scaffolding was never the point of the building. It's always pointing to what was going to replace it, what was going to be permanent. Similar. The Levitical system was magnificent, God-ordained scaffolding. It held Israel in place. It was preparing them, though, for the arrival and the finishing of the real thing. That's what Hebrews is teaching us. It's a dismantling of a system that they thought could get them there, but never could. It was actually preparing them for the real thing. Now, again, second point, you're having to think like, all right, well, how does this apply to me today? We're not in the Levitical system anymore. It's already done. We're already got Jesus now, so what are we talking about this for? Here's how it applies to us. You and I have a similar temptation to cling to the scaffolding of our faith rather than the real thing. What I mean by that, religious habits without relational nearness. Rule keeping without living in the rest that Jesus offers us. Some of us are tempted to do the right things in our life, to do the right things religiously without actually drawing near to God himself. Well, Hebrews 7 says the scaffolding of our faith has come down. The house is open, so get inside the house. The point is not to look at the scaffolding. The point is not to stay in the scaffolding. The point is to get in the house. It's open. Through Christ, it's open for us. So don't cling to those tools that are meant to prepare you, meant to lead you to, meant to point you to the one who is the actual thing. Don't stay outside. He continues his argument in Hebrews 7. In fact, he gets a little personal here, but it's verses 11 through 17, this next section here. Watch this happen. Now, if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for under it people received the law, what further need would there have been for another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek, rather than one named after the order of Aaron? For when there's a change in the priesthood, there's necessarily a change in the law as well. For the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe from which no one has ever served at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, and in connection with that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. This becomes even more evident when another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become a priest not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent or genealogy, but by the power of an indestructible life. For it is witnessed of him, here's Psalm 110, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So here's the argument the author continues to perpetuate here. He says that Jesus is from the tribe of Judah, not from the tribe of Levi. Now again, there were 12 tribes, all sons of Jacob, and they would trace their lineage. And we don't think that's a big deal, right? Most of us don't really worry about our ancestry and the genealogy too much anymore. But to them, it was a huge deal. Which tribe are you from? Which family line? And they would start naming fathers, grandfathers, and beyond. And they would trace back and they would check each other and they would have this relationship because of it. He says here, Jesus is from the tribe of Judah, not the tribe of Levi. Again, to us, what's the big deal? But for them, not one person in history was ever authorized to serve at the altar from the tribe of Judah. It was only the Levites. Only the Levites could serve. And you had to prove it. You had to bring your birth certificate. Say, look, I'm from the tribe of Levi. I can be a priest. Judah, they could not. And so when you think the time, the existing law, the genealogy, Jesus had no standing to be a priest at all. That's why Melchizedek shows up. That's why the author appeals to this Melchizedek character, to a different order of priest that God actually had been predicting all the way from Genesis 14 through Psalm 110. And he gets to this pivot here in verse 16. Watch this. Jesus' qualifications to be the priest are not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent, family line, genealogy, but by the power of an indestructible life. He is screaming this to us, saying Jesus gets to be a priest not because he's in the family line, but because he has an indestructible life. And here's why this is so important. When you go to the Levitical priesthood, every Levitical priest died. That's not like an insult or something. That's just biology, right? We're gonna get old and die. And so one would serve, and then he would die, and then someone else would take their place, and then that someone would die, and then someone else would take their place, and then that would die, and it would just keep perpetuating throughout. Levitical priest, generational after generation after generation. And they had to keep repeating the sacrifices, right? Like daily, regularly, yearly, they had to keep going on these sacrifices because those sins they were trying to sacrifice for were not finished by the blood, or they were merely covered by the blood. It was a temporary covering until the next time. They had to do it again the next day, and then do it again next year of atonement, and all these things. Like that's what they would need to do over and over and over and over. Jesus, however, Jesus has an indestructible life. Now, Jesus died too, remember? Jesus was crucified, Jesus died, Jesus was buried, but he didn't stay in the grave. Just a couple days later, right, that tomb splits open. Jesus walks out with the grave clothes folded behind him. He walks out and he is alive. Listen, his priesthood didn't pass to a successor because there is no successor. His life is indestructible, meaning he can be that priest forever and ever and ever. He's still the priest right now, sitting at the Father's right hand, interceding for us, making the way for us. Jesus didn't have to stay dead, but he came back to life. So here's the difference. Jesus is a priest of a different order. He's a different kind of priest. He's not from the Levitical tribes. He's not just because he's in the family line. That's what dad did, so I'm gonna do it too. He did it first and foremost in the order of Melchizedek, meaning it's a different order of priesthood. It's righteousness and peace meeting together. It's eternal. It's better. It's what Jesus was called over and over. John the Baptist, when he saw Jesus coming, John 1:29, he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Remember what I said about the priests, the sacrifices? Temporary. Covers the sin. Doesn't take it away. Covers it, repeated. Jesus came to take away the sin of the world. Try to think of a way to illustrate this. I'm from Western Oklahoma. People ask me, did I grow up like on a farm or something? Nah, it's far from the truth. I am not a country boy. I'm as far from it as you can get. But growing up at least helps me understand a little bit of the way things work out there in the fields. That sounds really condescending, I'm sorry. Parts of around the rivers especially would flood whenever a lot of rain would come. So they would build levees. Maybe you've seen this in like New Orleans, other places. These are either walls or mounds of dirt that you would build up to protect your field from getting flooded whenever the river would rise. And what would happen is those levees were great, but every year you have to repair it. You sandbag it, you fix the cracks, and hopefully it holds. And most years it does. But it's never finished. It's always provisional. You always have to keep working on it. It's always dependent on your next round of effort and maintenance to make sure that it's gonna hold this time. Jesus doesn't just patch the levee. He changes the topography. He changes the terrain. He takes the flood threat away. You know what I mean? Where we're trying to patch our spiritual life up to where we don't have a flood in our lives, Jesus wipes away all the risk at all. With him, sin is not merely managed temporarily, it is defeated eternally. So you don't have to worry about the flood anymore. He took the flood away. He took the flood on himself. And here's why this is so important. Because you know how most of us go through life? And I'm talking to Christians, right? I'm talking to myself. You know how most of us go through our lives? We go with this mindset of spiritual maintenance and effort, building, repairing, containing, making sure the levee is right, patching the cracks, sandbagging it up, right? And all that leads to is anxiety in the way we relate to God. You might have asked yourself the question before, have I done too much? Have I gone too far? You're worried in your soul, like, have I confessed everything? Is that how this works? Am I maintaining my standing before God somehow? And I'm worried, like I didn't patch it well enough and it's gonna break and I'm flooded. That's how most of us, even as Christians in this society, go through life. We try to patch it up spiritually, maintenance of our levee. And Hebrews 7 says the maintenance is over. The maintenance is over. Your standing before God is not held together by your next quiet time. That whether you're weak, balanced out in the scales well enough that God's gonna accept you this time. That's not how this thing works. Your standing before God is not held together by your moral effort. It's held together by the indestructible life of a perfect priest who never dies and never retires. And who never gets tired of interceding for you. Like that, isn't that freeing? Rather than walking through life just tense all the time that God's gonna smite you somehow and he's angry with you all the time. It's like, this is the freedom to see this great high priest who looks at you and says, I love you. And he's not mad at you when you sin. He's saying, I want better for you. Here's the way I've offered you to have a life and life abundant. You're choosing something else. Here's what I want you to choose. Here's what I want for you. That's what he's looking at you with. It's love. Grace, it's mercy, and that's freeing. But we're not even done yet. Listen, we could stop right there. 30 minutes in, we're done. Let's go. No, we're not even done. There's even better parts here. Watch the capstone of his argument. He's been building this argument the whole time. Watch this in verses 18 and 19 now. This is going to show us what the main goal of this whole thing has been. Watch this. For on the one hand, a former commandment is set aside because of its weakness and uselessness. For the law made nothing perfect. But on the other hand, a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. It's a stunning statement. It says that the former commandment is set aside because of its weakness, its uselessness. It's talking about the law of Moses. It doesn't say it's evil or wrong. It says it's weak and useless. Again, not in general, because it specifies here. It's helpful, it's instruction for us, but notice it says in verse 19, the law made nothing perfect. So what's it weak to do? It's weak to make you perfect. It's useless to make you perfect. For you to find this is the thing that's gonna help me. I've gotta get the rules right. I gotta get the order of life right, and then I'll be able to be perfect. The law can't get you there. It's fickle, it's limited. It can't offer you the hope. That's what it says, a better hope, right? It can't get you to the hope of perfection. It can't get you to the foundation of that hope, the true thing that we need forever, which is what this whole thing's been building to, this truth of nearness to God. That's the main goal here. That's the main goal it's always been. Nearness to God. See, the goal was never sacrifices. The goal was never the priesthood. The goal was never the temple or the incense or the washings or any of those things. The goal from Genesis to Revelation, from the garden to the new Jerusalem, the goal was always nearness to God. Like if you wanna know the heartbeat of this whole story, draw near. That's it, draw near. That's what it's all about. It's why one of the greatest blessings back in Genesis 1 and 2 was the fact that God walked with Adam and Eve. Together, face to face, they would have conversation. That was blessing, nearness to God. It's also why in Genesis 3, whenever they hid from him because of sin, he comes after them and he asks the question, where are you? He knew where they were. He just wanted the nearness. It's why God in Exodus, we're reading through the Bible, you see this in Exodus through Deuteronomy, you see this calling of God to be a holy nation, to be set apart and different. Why? So that he could dwell with his people. It's why he set up the entire sacrificial system, that they were terrified of him because of their sin and they had every reason to run away from him. But instead he sets this system up to say, here's a sacrifice that allows you to draw near to God again. It's why the greatest blessing of the new heavens and new earth someday when we get to eternity, the greatest blessing of that is not that you get to play golf in 70-degree weather, or that you get gold, streets of gold, or that grandpa's there. The greatest blessing of the new heavens, new earth is you see Jesus face to face. Like I got asked the question the other day, again, it's probably dozens of times in my life, if you could have all that heaven would offer you and Jesus wasn't there, would you still take it? That's a piercing question, right? Our first answer should be, you can take everything else away. Just give me Jesus and that's enough. Because that's the presence, the blessing is the presence of God, the nearness to God. Again, Hebrews 7 says the law can't get you there. Moral effort can't get you there. The process of following these rules can't get you there. Like a beautiful map of Yellowstone National Park, it shows you where to go, but it's not the park itself, right? It's the law of Moses was the most beautiful map ever drawn, but it is not the map, the thing itself, right? It's only a map to get you there. It can't carry you there. Jesus is the destination. Jesus is the guide, the path. He's the better hope that carries you near to God. He's this better hope of an eternal, different order of priests that gets you somewhere that the other priests can't. Because again, that's been the goal the whole time. Nearness to God. But here's what I know is true in this room right now. Some of us in this room have confused knowing the right things about God with being near to God. That you can have careful theology, but a cold heart. You can, again, Hebrews is full of theology. Theological precision is a gift, but it is not the goal. The goal is nearness to God. And it can get you there. It can be scaffolding to get you there, but it is not the goal. The goal is nearness, access to the very presence of God, which is exactly what Jesus, your great high priest, both secures and maintains. He does it for you. That's why Hebrews 4:16 can say this: let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. And think about that. Anytime you see the throne of God in the Bible, it's terrifying. It's holiness personified. It is something that we should be afraid of. We have every reason to be terrified of it because we are sinful. We shouldn't have access to a holy God. And so that's our default. But then Jesus, through his life, death, and resurrection, brings us to now be able to have confident access to that same throne. Like, just think about that for a second. Where you should be to what you now have in Christ. Humble, confident access to him. This is the better hope that we have. To get us to that nearness, the better hope we have. If your hope is resting on your track record, then you have every reason to be terrified of walking into that throne room because you have no standing. Like, if your access to God depended on how many days in a row you read the Bible, you're gonna be done by Thursday, right? That's why your better hope isn't something outside of yourself. Your better hope is this good news of an oath, a promise that God himself made before you were born, before you even sinned, before you had any track record to offer God at all. You have a better hope. It's not better because you suddenly walk out of here more committed to him today than you were yesterday. No, your better hope is in the fact that he is unending. He has an indestructible life, and his promise stands forever. And listen, isn't it amazing that he's not just allowing you into his presence? He is actually securing it and inviting you into it. And so draw near, friend. Psalm 16 talks about how in his presence there is fullness of joy. At his right hand are pleasures forevermore. We are all hedonistic at our heart level. We want pleasure, we want joy. He says, it's found in me. Nearness to God. Draw near to him today. As the worship leaders come back out, I want to invite you to just enter into a time of prayer with me right now. To just quiet your heart, your mind, remove distractions, just to think about this idea of drawing near. I'm going to read a couple verses here in a moment, but I just want you to stop and think, how do you need to draw near today? This is Hebrews 4:14 through 16. Use this as your prayer today. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Since we have that, let us hold fast our confession, our hope, our faith. For we do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. How do you need to draw near to him today? Maybe you don't know your eternity, or you're basing it off of your own track record. See it as useless today and see Jesus as your source of eternal grace and mercy. Draw near to him. Or maybe you had a bad week, and you feel far from God, feel like he's angry from you, angry at you. Draw near to him. Not by your own merit, but because of Jesus in your place, to find mercy and grace in your time of need. Draw near.